is Sasha Thackaberry-Voinovich. I am currently the president of an upskilling company, and I am here talking to Melanie Thompson. We're going to share a little bit about productivity tools and communication tools and why all this stuff matters so much to being effective in the workplace. So Melanie, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story first and yourself and what you do?
Thanks, Sasha. I appreciate it. So I am a program manager currently in a community college, and I've been in education for about 10 years. But before that, I worked in manufacturing, worked in a couple of different industries, and I've learned how important it is to be productive, also with the communication. So you're communicating with folks. One thing I'd like to add is I recently did get my project management PMP. So I understand communications with stakeholders, various different folks in the workplace. So I'm excited to talk to you about that, productivity and communication and how those two go hand in hand.
Thank you. So why don't you tell us about some of the tools that you have worked with? I know in our course, we've been talking about things like Slack and talking about things like Teams and Zoom and all this stuff, but what are some of the ones you've worked with?
So I have worked a lot with Teams, and I have to say I'm a big fan. So, the I heart Teams would be one of the things that I would say. So Teams I use in a lot of different ways that I'm familiar with. Teams is sort of built with Microsoft, as you know. Teams incorporates a bunch of different apps. So you're going to be seeing that in the workplace. You're going to see that you have this particular tool, but with this tool, you have all kinds of apps that you can add. So as far as communication goes, the way that we use Teams is used with our stakeholders in various ways where we can just, if you have an immediate need, you can reach out. And I think folks are pretty used to that with instant messaging and that sort of thing. But the other thing that we've done really with the stakeholders is we've separated out in channels so that you're not as inundated with all these different messages. We have a channel for each stakeholder and really where they are in the project that we're working on or in the group that we have going at that time in the workplace. So that's one of the ways that we use it. The other thing is I like to use myself a lot of the apps that are available. One of the apps that I definitely use is sort of the list app. And you would think, okay, the list, what is a list? It sounds simple. But the list actually is something that you could use to make sort of a heat map, which is a way to visually communicate your information, which is really, I found really important. There's not a lot of time in the day when you've got a lot of things going on. If you could take a look at something that's visual and quickly know where that thing is, what you need to do next, anything like that, that's really helpful. So Teams would be one of the things. There's so many others I could talk about, but that's one of the ways that I use Teams for sure.
Awesome. And you're a super user for sure. We've talked about this before. I
Yes.
use Slack too at the company I work at, and I have a engineering team. So they do software development,
Yeah.
and they actually have hooked into Slack some product alerts. So when the platform has maybe things go awry or there's an alarm, it will automatically notify folks because there's a plugin with Slack that works that way. And we also have some things that you can pull in from any number of places for it to give you even news updates on Slack. It's really very cool.
Absolutely.
And we use channels on Slack too. I have found that if you're not intentional about those channels, things can get out of control very quickly.
For
So
sure. For sure.
I think having those sort of clarifications for teams on what you're using for what,
Yes.
if it's in Teams, like put it in this channel, not the blast to everyone, or right, like when do
Yeah.
you create a new channel, or even is it appropriate for
Yes.
you to have a channel like dogs in the workplace? And maybe it is. Maybe that's like a
Right.
really great social thing for a virtual team, or maybe in your environment that would be a big no-no, right? So you have to
Right.
know your
Right.
context.
You certainly do. You do definitely need to know what you're talking about in that particular channel, what the reason for that channel is. And you can, as you said, you can write that down. You can figure that out for the group. I agree with you 100% that a lot of these tools can be used for remote work. And that's really important. We communicate differently when we're working remote. So those ability to have those Slack channels that maybe you can be the water cooler Slack channel, like you're
Right,
talking
right.
about dogs in the workplace. It helps connect folks. So I do think those are important for sure.
Yeah. What about like file sharing platforms or productivity platforms, or like, your home base,
Yeah.
SharePoint, stuff like that? What have you used in the past?
So one of the things I've used in the past is actually OneDrive. So this was kind of back in the day when OneDrive, so I've done this for a little while. So back in the day when OneDrive, if one person was working on their document and they didn't share it properly, you had a problem because you couldn't get to that document. So one of the things that I have to say as far as communication and productivity, make sure you're permissioning things properly. It's just a little
Oh my gosh,
reminder.
yes.
So that's really important. One of the other things that I would say, I have used SharePoint in the past, and SharePoint has come a long way. It wasn't as user friendly, and
No,
we've
it
had that
was not.
conversation before, Sasha. So you'll realize that it is now a little bit more user friendly, the way that they've interconnected it with the teams. So for file sharing, I'm definitely using more of the SharePoint, and I'm using it really through Teams. It ends up in SharePoint, but it's through Teams. So we create the files there in the different channels that we have. We're able to save that there. Again, you still have to be cautious about permissioning, like who has permission to the document, who's in that channel. So who's in that channel? Should they have permission to this document? Are you permissioning everything right? So that's a really important part of sharing documents. But one of the things that I would definitely say is that if it's something that you know is not proprietary or something like that, do try to share it more freely
Right, right.
because folks are able to come across this information. They're able to learn, and it allows your team to be more connected in what's happening, the work that's happening during the day. So that's just something, again, keep permissioning in mind. If you can share it freely, feel free to do that because it helps the whole team get a sense of what you're working on, what you're doing. One of the most important ways that I've used SharePoint, although it's also OneNote, um, is with my one-on-one meetings. So I've used OneNote within SharePoint. I guess that's the
Yep,
way to
yep.
speak of that. So it's a great tool to use that notebook style of learning
Right.
and of sharing information. So you have that notebook, you share it with your boss as for your one-on-one meetings. It's always there. You know where to click on the section or the page. And so both of you are able to find that information pretty easily. The other thing about any of these tools when you're sharing is your search, right? So make sure that you've named it in a way that you can search for it pretty easily. That's very important. So that's something that I would definitely suggest if you're working in a any environment where you have a manager, or even if you want to keep people informed. OneNote's a very helpful tool that's sort of inside of SharePoint. And when I talk about the OneNote, I'm a fan of that, but I know there are other tools, and I just like to mention, I know there's the Notion out there, and a lot of folks are using that now. It's sort of similar in nature to that OneNote.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I remember back in the day, I had started with Evernote. Some people still use things
Yeah,
like
of
Evernote,
course.
right? I've also found that version control makes the sharing permissions
Sure.
a little bit less scary because if something
It does.
does go awry, you can go back and find previous versions. And that's seamless. I mean, none of this stuff is perfect yet, but I've also used Google for a number of projects
Excellent.
where I'm working with other professionals or you're on committees or whatnot, and you do that. I've also used Basecamp. I know you've used Basecamp previously too. And I think the devil is in the details on all of
Yes.
these. If you don't define how you're using them and for what, you can get
Yes.
a perfect storm of horrible.
Right, because you're searching, you can't find the document you're looking for. I highly recommend, I know this is going old school, we're going way back. If you can start a naming convention from the beginning,
Oh no,
sometimes it
it's important.
helps.
It does.
It's helpful. It's not always going to translate, but if you personally at least have your own idea of how you would name things, you can find it in the search. So that's helpful. And again, the version control, you'll be able to do those sort of things for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It beats the heck out of sending things around as attachments and then you end up with 15 different versions of something, right?
Right, right.
Um
Or the dreaded reply all. So you don't
the
want that
reply
either.
Oh, yes, the reply alls. Thank you for that information. I did not really need that in my email,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, so just so many things going on. And I know that you've done a lot of project management as well.
Yeah.
And we're not getting into a ton of detail right now in those tools, but could you just mention like some of the ones that are out there that our people should know the names of, even just to start?
Right. Right. So definitely Notion is one of the hot ones to know. It's out there. So again, Notion's newer, but you can always use Teams. The Google Workspace that you
Yeah.
mentioned, that's definitely one of the places you can use. There's Slack. Um, folks, some folks are using tools inside of AI now. So it's interesting with Perplexity, the way that you can name different things inside of, because people are using AI. So I'm going to mention it. Within Perplexity, you can sort of have your own folders and that sort of thing. Even inside of Chat GPT, when you're looking at that, you have some ways when you start that new chat. I know it's just like, I'm going to just ask the question, but you can use, and some of this is in the paid version. So to be frank, it's not the free version. You can name some of your documents. So there's things that your tools that you're using in general now that are out there for communications, for productivity. You can do more of the file keeping, file naming on some of the AI tools that are out there now. And again, Notion's got a lot of AI within it too. So now folks are using that. There is AI coming, I think, inside of Teams now. There's more of that happening. Um, and Google Workspace, Google is doing some really interesting things with Gemini. So I haven't been able to use that as much. And don't forget about Notebook LM. So that's
Oh, I love
happening at the same
Notebook
time.
LM. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that is happening. It is free now, so get on it. I don't know when this will post, but it may not be free at that time. So those are some of the things that I'm looking into, I'm playing with right now to see how it fits in the way that I'm going to communicate, in the way that I'm going to work with the team.
Right. And each business has its own rules around what you can and can't do with AI. And those
True.
rules are transforming rapidly. I know in a lot of industries, they're actually leaning into their own sort of closed systems, like their own LMs,
Yes.
that they control what goes into it and that their results and the things they put into it are then not used to train the public models on things, which I know is a real
Right.
IP concern for some folks. But we've now veered into AI. But the truth of the matter
Right.
is that all these tools are going to have AI components to them moving
For
forward,
sure.
right? And so it is important to have a sense of what those things are. But I know we've gone over time, but I just enjoy this topic so much. So thank you, Melanie. I really appreciate it. And I have no doubt we will talk again.
Yes, for sure. Thank you.